Not quite sure how long this is going to be. Not even exactly sure what it's going to be, excuse me, about. But I have been, and it's probably just the YouTube algorithm picking up on some recent videos that I watched of primarily Gen Z people, rightfully so, who are rightfully just giving up on this world. But there are also some millennials, Gen Xers, even boomers, even though they made hay while the getting was good, they are also at a point of, yeah, none of this is okay at all. And it's not. To be blunt, this world is just, it's kind of fucked. And even the kinda seems like a little bit of copium. This world is fucked, man. But I'm saying this rather than and bury my face, even though this will probably lead to problems in the future, I'm sure. But I noticed a trend with these videos. They're roughly dashboard cam style videos, just filming yourself on your phone. And the primary content that comes through is basically just people, uh, you know, things that are just substantial material facts. It's just too hard to get a job. The higher education system is a scam. Entering trade school and the hurdles that come with even getting a terrible apprenticeship have turned that into a grift. Uh, the coding was a grift. I mean, AI does that bullshit at this point. And referring back to trades, like, that's just a highly nepotistic industry where you gotta get a fast track with. Um, yeah, I like how it's a guild system still too. Like, let's get medieval, and it's like, yeah, let's keep all the worst parts of guild systems of gatekeeping talented people from entering trades, and also let's make sure that we keep landlords. We gotta have the precious landlords, of course. So this is basically taking that style of video, dashboard cam, crash out, roughly, vaguely, crash out adjacent style videos, but I will just let you know on the front end, the difference with this is that we're going to be looking at things from a leftist perspective versus anything having to do with the spirituality of the world, tarot cards. That those will not be at play here. Also, just general kind of flippant comments regarding ever since smartphones or ever since COVID. And it's like, those are factors that are stacked on top of a fundamental rot that has really been a part of particularly the Western world, but has, through the process of colonialism and neoliberalism, uh, caused a global seismic shift, I guess. Actually, disregard a seismic shift in terms of just us needing to, I don't know, figure out what to blame at this point. But it's really been in the Western world for 100 years, and the fallout from that has been causing the world to just shake up in a very, very rotten way ever since then. And what was that seismic event that occurred? That seismic event was World War One, which we just do not talk about at all. But to uh, try to distill that topic as much as possible, World War One essentially was just a culling of the working class of surplus labor that existed throughout Europe. Um, while that wasn't the primary objective, that was at the point of a helpful side effect to alleviate bourgeois democracy, nation states, social welfare systems by culling the herd. Even if with a smaller labor supply, technically you end up having to pay people more. The thing is, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, they just end up monopolizing the means of production, aka the means to be able to feed, clothe, and in general build things for yourself, so that you are at their whimsy for just taking whatever you can get, with wages generally at their lowest point. I'm coming from the belly of the capitalist beast, the U.S. Minimum wage is generally supposed to be pegged at baseline necessities. Obviously, that's not the fucking case here. It's hard even with a wage that even like including inflation, things would have been fine with being able to have a house, but inflation, by the way, is not being caused by any sort of increase in the quantity of money that exists. The U.S. essentially has an infinite money supply, money printer. Everyone is forced to trade in U.S. dollars in order for them to meaningfully participate in the global economy as it's structured, particularly through the buying and selling of oil in Saudi Arabia, which only trades in U.S. dollars. That is where the concept of the petrodollar comes from, where you can establish a baseline of U.S. dollars based on how much a barrel of oil costs in U.S. denomination. So, since you have that on the docket of the U.S. dollar technically still being tied to a commodity to give it some semblance of value, the whole concept of fiat was never a truly real thing. Like, just it's whatever you want it to be. It's based on the faith and credit of the U.S. government. Well, that still needs to be brought. That's a little bit too idealistic. That still needs to be brought into a tangible material reality, and that material reality is U.S. dollars being pegged to the cost of oil through manipulation of the oil supply, as well as because look at countries like Iran that are just sitting on so many barrels of oil. The oil supply would not be a problem if it was not for U.S. sanctions primarily on countries like Venezuela and Iran, who, because of these sanctions, are barely able to sell their own oil in their own currency, which is a key thing as well, for a fraction of the price of the, even though there is a glut, in oil still at this point. Again, we keep finding new sources for it anyway, and existing sources aren't even close to being fully utilized, but we're just at a point where we could have more. We could have cheaper oil if we were interested in that, but through geopolitical concerns of U.S. dollar hegemony, that is not the case. And a byproduct of that as well, this was after the 1971 Bretton Woods Agreement, where the U.S. dollar used to be exchangeable for gold at a rate of, I believe, 35 U.S. dollars for an ounce. That fixed rate completely fell apart after an inflationary crisis in the U.S., driven by over a decade of economic growth, but primarily spending induced by the genocidal, disgusting, just we don't talk about it enough from the perspective of the resilient Vietnamese people who still have to deal with birth defects en masse because of just the horrible bloodletting that the U.S. did there, where numbers range. It's just insane that the casualty count from that of it's 1 to 2 million Vietnamese people died in that war. And a disgusting part of U.S. culture is we have the shoot and cry genre of movies where apparently only the U.S. soldiers are the ones that get humanized in all of this. We're going to be talking about a lot in this video, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, so definitely, let me know to just shut up and stick to a particular topic at some point, but this is more just bearing my soul session, just trying to talk some things through this just very fucked reality that we're living in again. From a leftist perspective, I honeypotted conservative men everywhere that were just begging for a right-wing dash cam style video, but alas, I can't help you there. I don't have a car. I'm too poor for that shit. But going back to World War I, which I was just kind of moseying on about being the focal point for just the fuckery that happened in the rest of the 20th and now heading into the 21st century. It was an inter-imperialist war. Capitalism had reached and is still in this state of development where both, regardless of whether government regulations were implemented or before, when monopolies were forming naturally in a very short amount of time in the late 19th, early 20th century. In the U.S., this was known as the Gilded Age. It was more like the age of the robber barons, where the laws of capitalist competition dictate that the key to being able to survive the constant crises of overproduction that exist in society is to reduce competition so that you are able to fix prices and then maintain a market without having to constantly lower costs further and further. The goal is to create a monopoly to survive in capitalism. And by the structure of how this centralization of firms occurs is in terms of how production is structured with consolidating productive activity into highly specialized, efficient spheres is what we want to do. to try to create as many commodities that we genuinely need as possible, as quickly as possible, with the least amount of labor that we need to contribute and the least amount of resources as well that we need to contribute. But instead, what we have with this socialization of production that occurs in monopolies is, well, a crisis of overproduction occurs not because we don't have enough of a commodity, but because commodities aren't able to be bought and sold at prices that the greediest people in the world are obsessed with selling their goods at in order to maintain a profitability rate. And barring that, if they can't hit that price exactly, then they'll just lower the costs of labor as much as possible, either by forcing people to work more or implementing technologies. We're seeing it desperately being grasped at by capitalists and particularly tech industries to leverage AI to make people more productive while still paying them the same amount of money while they generate more money for their companies. Or they just lay people off. Not surprising, because it's just hard as hell to find a half decent paying job, at least here in the States. So this crisis of overproduction is basically just capitalists can't sell a good at a certain price that meets their profitability goals, so they just say, all right, time for a recession. We'll lay some people off to weather the storm. We'll shutter the doors for a little bit, and the weaker firms end up going bankrupt and being bought out and essentially joining syndicates, cartels, trusts with the firms that are large enough, robust enough to weather the storm of recessions. Recessions are a part of the natural price venting that occurs, but also the natural process of centralization that occurs in capitalism. So if everyone is just begging, hoping and praying for this magical, unregulated, fair capitalism to ever come back into being, you miss the boat by... I mean, it's been... The propaganda makes it seem like it was like 60 or 70 years ago. You miss the boat by about like 140 years for that. So there was maybe a period of like 20 years where there was fair and growing capitalism that was very slightly replacing feudalism over time, but eventually that just ended up leading to more exploitation of people thrown from their land as former peasants and farmers by landlords and capitalist tenants, and forced to beg for a job, basically. And don't kid yourself on that. None of this shit is voluntary. We are essentially begging to be wage slaves for other people because they make it, again, seem like it's voluntary. But is it voluntary if I don't get a job with a reasonable wage, that I'm going to starve and be homeless and generally just have an awful quality of life, and they force us to, look in the streets at our fellow human beings who are suffering and barely eking out an existence? They think that this is voluntary. By the way, by the value that they're extracting from me, as I am helping these companies, as we're all helping these companies generate money, they then force us to buy back their fucking goods. I mean, so at that point, we're just kind of, you know, right? It's paycheck to paycheck is what it comes down to. And these companies are essentially just, on the whole, if you look at the entire business class, losing no money. They're essentially paying nothing for labor because you give everything back to them when you have to buy their shit again. And at this point, people are just rightfully throwing up their hands like, wait, what is the point of even trying at this point? And for them, there is no point in trying. But we have had our through heavy propaganda, through authoritarian police state measures, we have had our ability to meaningfully resist this capitalist exploitation that fully coalesced around, again, World War One, imperialist stage of capitalism, which just ended up going all the way into the modern day today and began a new iteration under the neoliberal revolution of just selling off more and more public assets for short-term profit, commodifying more of elements of the economy that were once free, and then over time just making it pretty much impossible for anybody to live that isn't like high six figures at this point. So I don't really want to go into the history of World War One that much. I'm sure nobody else here does either, but it's more just to bring up that war and that bloodletting of labor, and also just that led to essentially the destruction of the dominance of Europe as a I don't know, imperial entity in general. Sure, they had their colonies, but that really was the beginning of the end when you just murder hundreds of thousands, millions for certain countries of their own people for that you would traditionally have as enforcers of the global empires. Well, they're just fucking gone now. You just wasted their lives for nothing, other than figuring out who's going to get what colonies in the world. Glad you've got your priorities straight. But yeah, we're living in the aftermath of that, and we keep on telling ourselves that it's just because of new technologies. That's a part of it, but it really comes down to we just need to completely change the way that we relate to one another, which is primarily done through transactions at this point. And to go into just the most horrifying case study of what that level of thinking does to dehumanize human beings, you need to take a look at the fascist state of Pisriel at this point. I will not refer to it by its actual name. I will call it Occupied Palestine occasionally, but Pisriel does not. It is an apartheid genocidal entity. It is clear that nobody can live next to the people that inhabit this place, because Zionism, from its very inception, was an ideology that was conceived to just steal land. That's really what Zionism is. It's stealing land and engaging in ethnic cleansing for dubious reasons that have shifted between, Israel was originally founded as a pseudo-socialist state, where the awful first prime minister, horrible human being of Israel, of occupied Palestine. Uh, David Ben Gurion, real name David Grun, so we'll call him David Grun because fuck that fake Hebrew bullshit to make it seem like you've been on the land forever. He essentially created Israel as a pseudo socialist state, so that it could serve as an attractive bulwark for people that didn't want to be a part of another colonial globe bestriding empire, even though Israel is literally a colony that's colonizing other people at this point in the story, the early 1900s. From like 1917 on in earnest, with a combination of the second Aliyah settlers, but also the Balfour Declaration of the British Empire sponsoring the Jewish takeover of occupied Palestine. And excuse me, not Jewish. Let's make the distinction between Judaism and Zionism, because the vast majority of Jews, 90%, I believe, in the early 1900s were anti-Zionist. And when pogroms were occurring, which the idea of Zionism came before the pogroms of the late 1800s, early 1900s in Europe, the vast majority of Jews that were forced to flee pogroms, they ended up primarily going to the USSR because of strict anti-immigration laws in the UK and the US, which those people that were trying to flee to those places, a lot of them ended up in Israel. Pisrael, jeez. Sorry for mispronouncing that. And so anti-immigration was actually a huge reason why occupied Palestine was able to be occupied by so many Zionists. But this case study of occupied Palestine is important. One, because it's just woken up the whole world to what Zionism actually is, what people that have read about it have known to be true, but has just been shown in disgusting, horrifying detail. See, the difference between this being a thing that we've been living with for 100 years is with technology, just all of the horrors of late stage capitalism that have been going on since World War One, of inter-imperial powers fighting for market share for their respective multinational corporations to dominate. And they're all playing for the same team of an international, financial, entrepreneurial, military, bureaucratic elite. But the reason that things are just even more fucked up now is, one, the genocide that's going on now is even worse than the Nakba of 1948 in terms of actual casualties. And it could be, the numbers we just don't really know, but I think it's probably like gotta be at least 300,000 Palestinians as of today's date that have been exterminated by the Israeli occupation forces. And also, just with that technology, we're seeing this all in real time. You could keep genocides hidden. You had the first modern genocide committed by industrial grade genocide committed by Germany in the beginning of the 20th century in Namibia. And today, we're just, every single atrocity is just thrown in our faces, and people, the vast majority of the world, I can speak on the vast majority of US citizens, they none of us like Israel. None of us like the 80+% of Israelis that are wanting ethnic cleansing and just a full stop extermination of the Palestinian people to occur. And we are wholly against the Knesset and its majority vote of just now annexing the West Bank. I don't know if it was binding or not, but does it really matter? That this is a country of serial killer Karens at this point, and it's just it just sucks, and we just have to deal with. Sorry, my dog came into the room. Just gonna pet him for a sec. Okay. No, I'm not gonna walk you right now. But yeah, it's basically just us trying to figure out. Okay, here we go. I don't want to have to do too much editing for this, so I'm just gonna keep going stream of consciousness. But thank you for your patience there. So essentially, where was I going with that? People here do not support Israel at all. Unfortunately, and this is why I also felt the need to start making stuff like this, is because unfortunately a lot of people are falling into tropes, racist, ethnic tropes against certain people, saying things like maybe the Austrian painter had a point. No, he did not. Hitler was an idiot. He had no idea what he was talking about. He was making up fascism on the fly. Fascism as an ideology is basically just cobbled together hate, which is essentially what Israel is, who collaborated extensively with the Nazis, by the way. So let's also stop the victim narrative of, oh, the people that were Holocausted built this place. No. Israelis, by and large, did not go through the Holocaust, and every Holocaust survivor that wound up in that unfortunate place said they were treated like garbage by Zionists. So no, that also needs to stop. It wasn't this. It's not the oppressed becoming the oppressors. Zionists have always been oppressors in the land who directly collaborate with the Nazis to get weapons in order to kill Arabs during certain uprisings like Al-Thawa, Al-Kubra, as well as just various other just acts of resistance to reclaim their own land, their own homes, and just to maintain like a dignified existence where they won't be murdered by a racist Zionist at will. But people here do not support that country, and thankfully I would say primarily for reasons of just ethics, but it needs to go deeper than that, where the deeper dive material analysis that I've just touched on surface level of the project of Zionism and why it's occurring is essentially just the logical endpoint of thinking purely in capitalist terms. There are a ton of international investment banks lodged in Israel, a ton of big tech R&D centers that the U.S. collaborates with. It's probably known by more people that the Israeli occupation forces train U.S. law enforcement. Israelis use Gaza in particular as a weapons testing site. USAI is directly integrated with the U.S. military to target women and children U.S. bombs, U.S. missiles, U.S. drones are just wantonly slaughtering uh, just the most stalwart people I've ever seen in my life to live in the face of this disgusting bloodletting. Uh, and in addition to that, Pisreal. Sorry, that's probably getting annoying saying that over and over. It's my first video. Give me a break. Uh, it's Pisreal wants to turn Gaza into a fucking beach resort. And U.S. real estate is all on board with this shit. And don't get it twisted. They'll pretend and they'll pay lip service to it, but European Union countries, Australia, Canada, various settler colonial countries in Latin America, or just colonial countries, depending on what your definition of colonialism or settler colonialism entails. Countries like Argentina, Guatemala, and Honduras are both very Zionist as well. Sri Lanka is just insanely genocidal and has collaborated with Israel to subjugate and ethnically cleanse, as well as set up the most militarized zone in the world, I believe, on the island of Sri Lanka. The Sinhalese Buddhist nationalists engaging in ethnic cleansing of the Tamils who were there before them, and again supported by Israel. Israel is also helping ICE in deporting people to Honduras as well, because the largest U.S. base in Latin America is located in Honduras. Anyway, there are just so many threads of capital Gaza being a real estate, speculative real estate asset, massive international investment banks located in Israel, and just the illegal settlements. Large reason they're not being condemned is they are being used. Well, they are condemned by the UN, which is just useless because the US just vetoes everything. And these kibbutzim are just used as R&D centers, essentially. They train U.S. military and law enforcement personnel, which we are seeing in real time in the U.S. of just, let's call in the Marines in L.A. Are you fucking kidding me? And just all of that is what the logic of genocide is. These people are demons, but they're not demons because they just are like, I like watching children die. Some of them are just sadistic fucks, particularly far-right, like revisionist Zionists, people that would join like the Irgun or the Stern Gang or something like that. But a lot of people are just like, we're gonna make money doing this. And that really is like the default of whether you are a human or not under this global capitalist system that we live under. If making money is the only motive, then you've lost your soul. And not just making money to support yourself, but turning that money into capital as a way to exploit human labor and then earn a profit off of someone else generating commodities for you. Yeah, this is a long first video, but appreciate everyone letting me talk at this point, because these disparate thoughts have got to go into the ether somewhere, and that's another thing. I can't really be talking to people face to face about this because people just kind of, and slightly understandably so because of the pressures we face here in American society, they just kind of want to just keep their heads down. But we're at a point where this logic of capitalism is leading to an extermination of an entire group of people. And people are wondering what happened to make the world change like this. It's been happening. We just know now. We have the technology of phones. We have uh, in depth just accounts across various social media of the atrocities occurring. We are an interlinked world. We can hear victim testimonies and see the horrors unfolding before our eyes in real time. Um, People that are saying that the problem is the smartphone, the problem is a lack of socialization or whatever the fuck of Gen Zs. No, do a material analysis. This economy is screwed. Everything is a grift. We're saying that it's okay to murder innocent people because of perceived paranoia that something will happen to them. If you read testimonies of early Zionist settlers, it is universal that their accounts of Palestinians were that they were exceedingly welcoming and kind to Jewish settlers, and even showed them how to cultivate the land. And then in all their grace, the Zionists just said, "Oh, we hate Arabs," and just started throwing them off. Um, I don't really. This isn't about monetization or whatever. That's another thing. If I actually do end up making these more, there's not going to be monetization, at least in the form of like ads. I'll say, yeah, give me some money if you want to give me some money. But I don't even think this is going to get more than a dozen views anyway. But to, I guess, like, kind of try to wrap it up because this has been going on for a while. The point of this was to just do a rant style video, but trying to enter it into a not just leftist, but more of a Marxist Leninist material analysis of certain things that and technology is a part of that, but Marxism is primarily about examining the class structure of society, which is oriented around the means of production and who controls them in order to control the creation and distribution of commodities. And it is a class of, like I mentioned, global bureaucrats, military and intelligence personnel, financial elites, as well as industrialists and just entrepreneurs in general, and investors that are telling us that we just need to keep on grinding, and then maybe we'll be able to be a piece of shit like them someday. And that's not a world that we deserve, even if some of the aspects of humanity are as just vile as they are. We can do better than this. And capitalism has been around, generously putting it, has been around for maybe 500 years. This is not how human beings have been designed to interact with one another, to treat one another, to create things for one another. Those things are constantly changing, but capitalism has destroyed a lot of former bonds that were archaic, like those associated with slavery and feudalism to a certain extent, while reappropriating those aspects to suit industrial production. Like I said, we still have landlords. We had chattel slavery until very recently, industrial grade slavery until very recently. We have sex slavery that is occurring in mass still. And people paid so poorly that they are, I mean, we're all wage slaves because we have to sell our labor power in order to earn a less than equivalent wage of the commodities that we generate just to feed and clothe ourselves and house ourselves. But we're at a point where like there are people that are virtual slaves. You've got the prison industrial complex as well, of just free labor primarily being performed, at least in the United States, because I know that the US is by and large, definitely per capita, but I think in aggregate, the largest prison population in the world. Uh, Capitalism would not be able to sustain itself without maintaining these horrifying excesses of outmoded modes of civilization. It's the reason I wanted this as a sort of like dash cam style rant video too is not just for the honeypotting, but if the honeypotting does work, like, wake the fuck up. You're not in a free country. Speaking from the perspective of the United States, you're not in a free country. Stop talking about how great this is. Stop talking how a bunch of slave owners and exorbitantly wealthy merchants had the ideas of the people in mind. People don't know anything about the early history of the U.S., where we couldn't even vote for House of Representatives for a while. Things have only become marginally democratic over time, but were insanely anti-democratic at the very beginning. And they still are. I mean, electoralism is a fraud between two corporate parties. This is why we need to build a third party. Democrats are never going to change. They're just not. And we need to stop hoping against hope that this corporate genocidal party is going to transform itself. No, we're just going to have to do it ourselves. And at least we've got, I mean, anyone in the rest of the world watching this would just think that's absolutely pathetic what I'm about to say. But we have DSA as a start for something, as a foundation. U.S. labor, if you look at the early 20th century, faced the most violent repression in global capitalist history, arguably. It at least in the Western world. Because God knows that if you're like a banana worker in Guatemala or in Ecuador, they're going to just kill you. If you try to leave even your essential slave labor jobs there. Been all over the place in this one. But people have just got to get a clue that, like, what do you think that the U.S. is? This country was built on the blood and sinew of Native Americans that were just slaughtered en masse. And people say, let's brush that under the rug, but more than half of U.S. states, it's like this country is filled with a bunch of skinwalkers that are just like, we're, and the U.S. military does this too, where they'll name helicopters Apache, Chinook, Black Hawk. They're wearing the skins of the Native Americans they slaughtered on the vehicles they're going to use to slaughter more indigenous people all over the world. But U.S. states are just, more than half are named after Native American words and tribes. So it's just like, people want to say that's the past. It's literally the present. Native Americans are still severely discriminated against, and every Every person that doesn't look like me, basically, is insanely discriminated against in this free country still. People have just got to wake the fuck up. And I'm not even saying this from the perspective of you need to understand because you need to fight back against this thing. We do need to do that. But I'm going to speak to the self interest of people out there. Do you think that the world is okay with what the US is doing in essentially just focusing on Gaza? Because, God, there's just too many other things that the US has their hands in the cookie jars for. But just looking at Gaza, do you think that the world is going to just forget that that happened? Because this genocide is only possible because of the US, who is directly participating in it, by the way. Don't get it twisted. There are US soldiers in Israel, and certainly US mercenaries working for the fake Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where they're just blasting Palestinians in food lines, just trying not to die. Do you think people are going to forgive this country? They are not. And you're going to feel the boomerang effect from that. The chickens are going to come home to roost. We need to fight back so that when there is justifiable retribution against this country, you're not going to be one of the ones that are part of the herd that gets cold here. Justifiably so, because this place is an evil, evil land. You're going to have to fight back because you need to show the world that you accept the evils of this place and that you are not identified with this genocidal, settler, colonial, still mostly apartheid U.S. state. Why do you think the U.S. supports Israel? It's a settler colony, just like fucking they are. This is the U.S. Israel picked up on its tactics from U.S. Manifest Destiny, and so did the Nazis. And the Nazis learned from the Pisraelis and vice versa. Do you think that the U.S. was really that against the Nazi ideology in World War II? They literally rehabilitated the Nazi government, with the majority of their Ministry of the Interior being former Nazi Party members in the 1970s in West Germany. The U.S. was not the good guy in that war. We lost the good guy in 1991. Their names were the United Soviet Socialist Republics. They are gone. And that was the bulwark that capitalism forced itself to maintain any level of bare minimum social services, protections, as a pretense of we're better than communism, as we wage war all over the world and try to exhaust their resources. Oh, and by the way, the tens of millions of those communists died in World War II, while the U.S. Lost a few 100,000, I believe, and was safely in its little sphere in North America, away from everything. Just wake the fuck up. Get it together in terms of not filleting the mythology of this country anymore. And beyond that, we need to stop saying that there's nothing I can do. I called my congressman. That's not enough. I went to a protest. These are both good things, but this is not enough. What we need is to build something together. We have forgotten how to build things because capitalists just tell us to build whatever the fuck they want us to. We've got to build a third party for ourselves. DSA is kind of getting there, and the Green Party could serve as a vehicle potentially, but these two corporate parties, people think that it's the ultimate democratic right to vote. You're you're just checking off a fucking scantron. What meaningful political participation did you have in that party's process of nominating their candidates? None. You had zero democratic input. And if voting is all that there is, then you're just on a fucking script at that point. And the script isn't working. We need to rewrite things completely and stop lying to ourselves that this place is in any way redeemable. Just like the state of Israel, which is frankly just an extension of all the most violent, horrible, entitled tendencies of US society, just in fucking overdrive. Um, so, yeah, I think that I covered enough disparate ground there. I hope that this was at least good angry ASMR to listen to. I don't know if I'll ever make another video. I might. I do like ranting. This was very therapeutic, actually. And thank you for bearing with my conjunctions that were thrown in there. But I've seen a lot of those styles of videos recently, and I wanted to push back against the norm of primarily right-wing people just saying, Gen Z just doesn't know how to socialize. I mean, I'm like on that bridge of very late millennial, early Gen Z. I would actually say I'm pretty solid at socializing. It's just the issue is a lot of older people just want to talk about just stupid ass bullshit that doesn't matter and wants to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. We're in a different world where we don't have the same just mundane bullshit things to talk about because they grew up in an era of excess. We're just trying to survive. I mean, what do they think? Why do they think that, and I don't know why I'm calling them they, I'm just out of touch old people in general, which also the gerontocracy of this society is insane. I want to touch all the points. But just, why do they think we want to talk about what they want to talk about? Just stupid bullshit. Maybe just like be quiet for a little bit, because we've already got too much noise. I actually don't have any social media outside of YouTube, and that has helped out the mentals immensely. But for people that are plugged into those, yeah, it's not good for you, but it didn't lead to the death of socialization. The thing that led to the death of socialization is everything being a grift, everything being a scam, price gouging, people just gaslighting you openly, saying everything is actually fine, this is actually good when it's not good. No, there's a reason why the Gen Z stare is the thing. It's because they have to deal with out of touch people acting like Karens that are mad that they can't get their social fix because their family kicked them out of Thanksgiving gatherings or something. So I will, before I get, I guess, too off track, just want to say, if you did listen to all of this, thank you. Hope we can all just weather this storm. And for people outside of the U.S., there are just a very small number of us, granted, but there is a small number of us. And by small, I mean millions upon millions of people, but there's just a lot of people in the U.S. But there are millions of people here that are trying to fight back against what is the most evil country in the world, which is the United States. and its extension of Israel as a forward operating base slash colony. There are people that are trying to fight back. We are being oppressed massively here. And we are having to like relearn our entire labor history in the US, and breaking through the absolutely insane propaganda here is a monumental struggle. So when the chickens do come home to roost, none of us have any right to hold it against other countries. I would say that like I just happen to have the credentials and got plopped out on this piece of dirt. But would I say that I'm an American by law? Yes. De facto, I mean, I don't I don't have any love for this place. I don't have any love for um, thanking troops for their service. What, you're getting paid? And there are other people that are poor that didn't feel like they needed to. I know that the propagandization is crazy, but it's just like, what are you serving? Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, GE, Boeing. Wow, you're such a good servant. And then people will say that God's blessing this place. Moronic. You're this place is blessed by Moloch or some other like archdemon, archon, and hell. If anyone is into I don't know, demonology or whatever, I'm not super brushed up on that, and I wanted to keep it material. But no, you don't worship God. You worship the project of America, which is a genocidal settler colonial project that is expanded into being a globe bestriding empire that, God willing, keep it material, that the nature of causality willing will meet its demise. And as if you are stuck in this imperial hellhole, you should want that. It's going to be better for you. Trust me. The end of America as an imperial, genocidal, racist project does not have to be the end of you. You don't have to identify with this place. Identify with your fellow man. That's really what we all need to try to do, to not lose our humanity in the midst of this insanity as we struggle and as we witness atrocities committed against people that never ever deserve to go through what they're going through. So thank you again. And if I did honeypot a white conservative male and you found something worth listening to in some of my words, that's great. Because we've got to come together to struggle against this society that we're trapped in.